The next CSS solution that we will explore is called Tailwind CSS, and it is one of my personal favorites, not just for React projects, but for all modern front-end projects. I will be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of CSS and certainly wasn't the biggest fan of CSS for many years. And Tailwind actually made CSS a lot more fun for me due to its very quick feedback loop. So I'm always happy when I get the chance to introduce this library to a new set of learners. So first up, what is Tailwind CSS? Tailwind CSS is a library that consists of thousands of CSS classes. The classes are called utility classes because they each serve a small, distinct purpose. They are utilities because they focus on one tiny thing. So if you go into the Tailwind documentation, what you'll discover is that every class available in Tailwind basically defines just one CSS property or one CSS attribute. So for example, the flex class from Tailwind applies display flex to the element that you apply the class to. There's also the M6 class, which applies a certain amount of margin around every element. And M6, as you might guess, is one of several available margin classes. There's M4, M5, M7. There's also classes specifically to apply margin to the top or margin to the bottom. There's literally thousands of these small classes that each do one thing. So instead of having to define and name our own CSS classes and aggregate a whole bunch of styles together, what we do in Tailwind CSS is we just start with regular HTML or JSX, and then we build up our UI by adding a whole bunch of Tailwind helper classes as our classes for a given element. So when we're using Tailwind, we're not actually writing that much CSS. We're basically just adding a whole bunch of CSS classes to our existing elements. That's actually one of the criticisms of Tailwind, is that you're going to see a lot of classes attached to a single element. And the reason for that is because all of Tailwind's classes accomplish a small thing, so you're adding up or composing a whole bunch of them together to form the final styling for that given element. We'll see what this looks like, of course, in a lesson or two from now. So I want to draw the distinction between Tailwind versus a component library. You may have heard of component libraries like Bootstrap before. Bootstrap is probably the most famous one. And these libraries provide pre-styled components that have already been kind of designed, right? So for example, Bootstrap will give you a blue button with a white font, and it has a certain width and a certain padding. It has the styles already applied to it. Tailwind CSS is not a component library. It's not going to give you a pre-designed button or a pre-designed card. Tailwind is just going to give you thousands of available CSS classes, which are sort of shortcuts that we can apply to our existing class definitions for an element to have that quick prototyping. The best way to describe it is, imagine starting a project with all the CSS classes already written for you, and you just have to choose which classes to apply to what elements. So imagine that you're not going to be writing any CSS moving forward. You've just been given thousands of CSS classes from another developer. All of those CSS classes basically do just one thing, usually one thing, and we have to combine a bunch of them together to get to our final look and feel in the browser. So of course, the best way to experience Tailwind CSS is to see it in action. I realize these descriptions aren't perhaps capturing exactly what Tailwind is. So in the next lesson, we're going to set up this powerful library, and then after that, I'm going to show you how we can actually use it with React. So that's all there is to cover in this lesson. So I will see you in the next one.